to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Ruth A. Casie. Ruth is a USA Today bestselling author of historical, swashbuckling action adventures and contemporary romance with enough action to keep you turning pages, and have earned her several coveted Crown Heart awards. Her stories feature strong women and the men who deserve them, endearing flaws and all. She lives in New Jersey with her hero, 3 empty bedrooms, and a growing number of incomplete, counted cross-stitch projects. Before she found her voice, she was a speech therapist, pun intended, client liaison for a corrugated manufacturer, and vice president at an international bank where she was a product marketing manager. But her favorite job is the one she's doing now, writing romance. She hopes her stories become your favorite adventures. Her latest novel, The Lady and Her Quill, is book 1 in the Ladies of Summer by the Sea series. Welcome, Ruth. Please tell us a little more about yourself and your new novel.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here. A little bit more about myself. I'm, as you said, I'm empty nester, and I tend to spend my days dreaming and writing. I've always read romance. When I was working for the bank, I did a lot of international travel. It was the days before webinars and Zoom. And I'm really sorry about the notices going off, but it's a new computer and I don't know how to suppress it. So, so those are the kids telling me they're not going to call me. So anyway, I traveled overseas, and the trips were long, and I would take romance books with me because they were easy to read. I didn't get too involved in them. You could easily pick up where you left off. And when I would travel, I would be away for 2 weeks and I would take 10 books with me. And sometimes I'd wind up buying more when I was overseas. Lots of people at the hotels I stayed at loved it because I stayed at the same hotels usually most of the time because it's a corporate thing, and they would wait for me to come and take my books when I was done. So that was really great. I started writing when I was very involved in in the local women's shelter here in Bergen County, New Jersey. It's for victims of domestic violence. I was on the board, and we always had a prior client on the board. So when we did things, it kept us in touch with our client base. And this young woman was our secretary at the time. I was president. And she mentioned that she was going to write she's write a book. And I said, are you going to write a book about your experience? And she said, oh no, who wants to read about that? I'm going to write a romance. So she was a good friend. So I said, okay, I'll beta read, I'll help you. And one thing led to another. And after talking for a while, because we met several times, we decided to write our own books and sell them together as a set. We got probably 4 or 5 weeks into it, and I was really excited. And then she said she had to back out because she was training for the New York Marathon and taking her daughter looking at colleges. So that was 10 years ago. I cried, and she said I could go on and do it on my own, which I did. And the book that I had been working on with her was my first book sold. It was sold to Carina Press, the digital press for Harlequin at the time. So that's what started me writing. And I've really never looked back. I have just gone on forward.
Wow. Just 10 years? It's only been 10 years since you started?
Maybe, I'm lying, 11.
Okay.
It was 2011.
2011, okay. And how many books have you published in those 11 years?
20.
Wow. Wow. So like approximately 2 a year.
Right. And I remember when I was leaving the bank, I was working for JP Morgan. When I left the bank, my the senior officer said, well, you've been in the bank 25 years, you're a vice president, you should send something out to the people telling them you're leaving. Well, they wanted a party, but most of my work was done overseas. So I didn't feel it was necessary for a party, but I did put out a letter to an email to my contact list. And I said, I'm not retiring from the bank. I am retiring to my new career, which is writing. And it was the best thing I did. I should have done it years before.
Well, it was perfect timing. It was perfect timing. That's how you have to see it. It was meant to be. That was time. And can you tell us a little bit more about your new series about the Ladies of Summer by the Sea?
So the Ladies of Summer by the Sea is it's a series, and it all takes place in this fictitious little town just south of Newcastle in England. And it's a seaside town. And the central part is the women, all the ladies are graduates of the same seminary. They're ladies of gentry, of title, and they have gone to the seminary. The only way you can go to the cemetery, the only way you can go to the seminary is if you're invited by the headmistress. She doesn't just take anybody. You have to qualify. And nobody really knows what the qualifications are, but you'll find out through the series that she chooses, the headmistress chooses women who are bright, self-starters to a certain extent, maybe need a little bit of a push, but have some sort of talent. The first one, on the Lady and Her Quill, the story is about an author. And in the second book that's coming out next week, The Lady and the Spy, the heroine is a puzzle solver, and she winds up solving a mysterious code for the British government. The third one in the group, which will come out in May, The Lady and the Duke, is in the process of being outlined. So I really can't tell you what she does because I haven't figured it out yet.
Oh, okay. Wow, and it comes out in May. How long does it take you usually to write one of the novels?
So this is a 60,000 word novel, and it will take me probably about two months, because I spend a lot of time outlining and developing. I'm not really a plotter. I'm a cross between someone who plots and someone who pantses. So I call myself a plotzer.
A plotzer, okay.
Because I put an outline together so that I know where the story's going. But to me, the beauty of writing is as you write, your characters tell you things, and they take you down a different path, which is why I can't tell you about The Lady and the Duke, because he's talking to me in my head and we're arguing about what he's doing. I've gone through a whole book where I've come to write towards the end and then find out that one of the major supporting characters has a twin brother. So I had to go back and put him in. So to me, that is wonderful. That's the part of writing that, to me, those bursts of information that just excite me.
That is exciting. That's a fun way of writing, where the story, it's kind of like a movie in your head. Yes. You're kind of going along, and it's coming to you as you type the manuscript. There's a question. Your term for what you are, plotzer.
Plotzer.
Anne really likes that, and she says, "I like the term you used, but autocorrect won't let me thank you for it."
You're welcome, Anna.
And I was going to ask if there's something that's not in the blurb for The Lady and the Quill, or for The Lady and the Spy.
So with The Lady and the Quill, what you don't know until you read the story is that, so let me tell you a little bit about the story. It's an author who has gotten she's an author who has arrived, so to speak. She's really a very prestigious writer, and she's got a good following, and she gets this one bad review. And to her, her life is falling apart. Her publisher is saying maybe the next one won't come out so fast. So she is very, very upset, and she blames it on another author that's actually mentioned in her review. So that's the way I got that premise is actually that first book that I told you I wrote with this friend of mine. One of the things that I did as a new author was I was very attached to reading reviews because I wanted validation in some way. I thought the book was good, but I'm biased, I will admit. Those friends of mine who read the book, they thought it was phenomenal. Again, biased. So I was reading reviews, and this one review came out that was absolutely scathing. And when I read it, I trying to learn from the review, I realized that it was nothing in the story in that review. It was a personal attack. And because I have a son who does computer stuff, and he's actually in cybersecurity at the moment, I had him check. How do I find out where this person is? Because is it a friend? Is it family? And it turned out, I don't know who it is, but it was somebody not even in this country. So I went, okay, this is just a bad thing. I used part of that review in the book, only because it was my way of getting back at that person.
Absolutely. It's a good way. It's a good, very good way.
No one else will know that, but now you and me. But it made me feel good.
Well, I bet that's awful that somebody decided to write an awful review just for no reason.
Well, it happens, and you have to have you learn to have a tough skin, and you learn which ones are the valued ones and which ones are not. Sometimes reviews that are not good are very, very helpful because there are things that you may not see that you think you've made it clear, or your what you wanted to do just doesn't work, and that's okay. I can take those. I didn't cry too much at this one either.
Anna is asking, how did you choose to go like from historical, from medieval romances to Regency?
Okay, so the different time periods have different boundaries. So I enjoy my medieval stories. I've got 2 series in those, but I wanted something where I could grow these women more. I didn't want contemporary. I've written some contemporary, but my voice is really historical. So I picked a time when women were evolving into what was then the Me Too movement in their own way. So here were women who were suppressed in many ways, who didn't have many rights, and who were intelligent and needed to do their own thing. And those are the heroines that I talk about. Those are my heroines. Because one of the books in the future will be a doctor, a female doctor. You didn't have many female doctors in the 1800s. You did, but you don't know about them. So those are the people I want to talk about. Those are the people's stories I want to elaborate on.
I guess that answers my question of, are you going to write more books in this series?
So we have The Lady and Her Quill, The Lady and the Spy, The Lady and Her Duke. And when I am going to, my publisher is Dragon Blade Publishing. And when I hand in the 3rd book, I will be proposing 3 additional books for that series.
Okay. And do you have a favorite character from the series or from any of your series?
So I do. So my very first hero, and it was medieval. It's called the Knight of Runes, and his name is Eric. My son was in college. His name is Ari, and he swears the book is about him. Eric is a very he's a very determined man. He's from the 1605. He is a landowner, and he rules his roost. When he finds a woman that is actually fallen back in time from the 21st century, and she's very independent, he has no idea what to do with her or how to do with her, except he figures out real quick that he's in love with her. So his arc is just, to me, a beautiful one, because in the book that follows, I actually had to go the other way, where she returns to the 21st century by a trick of the villain, and then he has to come and find her. So his determination and his love for her is just so powerful that he has always been my favorite. In this new series, I thought each book would have a person that I would be close to. And it turns out the two people that flow through all the books are the headmistress and her love interest. So the headmistress, we don't know. All we know is that her name is Mrs. Bainbridge. She has this awesome seminary. Her close friend is Lord Barrington, who is a surviving veteran of the Napoleonic War. And he was very badly wounded, and his men have stayed close to him. Those of his men, of his officers who have also retired, have stayed close. And because in this period of time, there were no police departments or police organizations in every town, they were localized by region, he and his men turn out to be the local police. So Mrs. Bainbridge and Lord Barrington, they hint at each other, they tease each other, and I love that interaction. So they've become my favorite in this series.
Will they have their own book, or is that?
Yes, they've been yelling at me. They told me that if I get 3 more books in this series, one has to be for them.
Well, that'd be good. I
Yes.
guess by then everybody will want their book to come out.
Right.
And I was going to ask about your historical and contemporary. I did see. So it seems like a time travel. So there's also time travel. You said your voice is historical.
Yes.
How many contemporary novels did you write? And
So my contemporary travels. Your writing has had a little bit of a course. So working with the New Jersey romance writers, I have 4 close friends who are critique partners. And just about 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, we decided to write an anthology together. And we picked a topic and we each wrote a story. Problem was that if we had such great hopes that we said, who's going to publish it? Because Amazon will not, it's going to be through Amazon, but Amazon won't pay all 4 of us. They'll only pay one of us. So we created our own publishing company called Timeless Scribes Publishing, and we published through there. So we started out doing books twice a year, but it became too difficult because we had other projects that we were working on. So we did it once a year. And at this point, I think we have 6 books that we put out. And then we started to pull our individual stories out of the anthology and separately publish them. So it's a long story. I don't have short stories very often, Janette. So it's a 6-book series. Mine is called Havenport Romance.
Okay. Okay. I did see those on your website, and I did wonder if they were the ones that were the contemporary. Okay.
Yes, they
Um,
are. And the funny thing, not the funny thing, but those stories, if my family reads them, they'll get not necessarily upset, but almost all those stories are taken from my family experiences.
oh, okay. There's a lot of stories there.
There is. So with the, I think it was the one story was I have an older brother, and he got married, and I was the witness, and he calls me up 10 years later. We speak all the time, but he called me up and he said, "Do you want to be the witness at Eloise and my wedding?" I went, "I did that already." He said, "Yeah, we had a problem. It was never registered."
Oh, wow. Oh,
And they didn't find out until Eloise turned 65, and they were doing paperwork, and they for her health plan, and they couldn't find any record of her marriage. So I went back out to California, and I witnessed my brother's wedding a second time. I put that into a book. I thought, what a great premise for a story. What would somebody do? Do they want to get married? Do they have to get married? So
that is a great premise. I mean, in real life, but a great premise.
yeah.
You mentioned that you've been writing for 10 years. I want to ask the person that you started writing with, did she ever complete a book?
No, she never did. Her book was more of a paranormal, which is why we started working together. And then I said, my ideas aren't going to work with you. So she said, well, what are your ideas? So I started telling her. She said, that's when she said, well, you write yours and I'll write mine. Her stories were, well, mine had some magic because my hero, first of all, it's a time travel, so there's magic there, but our hero is a druid master. So there's a little bit more magic. But hers was a bit more blatant magic than mine. And she went on to, she was busy with her family and with the marathon.
What's the most difficult part of writing for you?
I'm going to tell you that when Lena was talking to us a little bit before, she mentioned conflict.
Mhm.
I have the same problem because I am conflict adverse. My job, my job in my family is no conflict. Keep conflict at the minimum. So I find that well, Lena said that her story could end on page 4 because you sit down and figure it all out. I go a little bit longer, but I find that I write and then I go back and say, where can I make it worse? Where can I really tug? So in that second book, I told you that my first book was Night of Runes. The second one, where he has to follow her into the 21st century, is called Night of Rapture. And he finds her and he tells her he will never leave her. And I said, so how can I make this terrible? I have to make him leave her. So as I'm writing this section of the story where he figures out that in order to save her, he has to leave her, I am in tears. I was in tears when I wrote it. I was in tears when I edited it. And when I reread the book, I still cry.
That's good. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me to do. It really is. So I don't like to make people bad. I like to make them good.
So no bad guys in your story?
Oh, they're bad guys. Oh, wait a minute. No. I learned.
The bad guys are just, they're not going to reform the bad guys, or do you ever reform the bad guys?
So thank you for asking that question, because again, with Night of Runes, there's a third book planned, and that's where I take the villain, because it's the same villain in the first 2 books, and I'm going to redeem him and make him a hero. Because what I found out when I wrote that second book, it's his stepbrother. It's the hero's stepbrother.
Okay.
So I figured he has to be redeemed. I can't have the hero have a bad brother.
It's true, and they are fun to redeem.
Yes, they
Those are tend
are.
to be, people tend to gravitate towards the bad guys and hope that you redeem them.
A little bit of a bad guy's not bad. That's why sometimes even a hero needs I won't say a mean streak, but there has to be something that he has to change as well. Where's his growth?
Absolutely. Um, so how much research do you do for your novels, especially the historical part of it?
So I don't have to do a lot for a contemporary because I live contemporary. Maybe places that I'm thinking of going, or sometimes if I'm talking about a car or whatever, there's a little bit. But the historicals, when I outline, I usually start to research when I come up with an idea. Well, the Lady and the Duke, which I'm halfway through writing, I still find myself researching as I go. Today, I was researching dancing, where some action takes place at a celebration. Well, what are they going to be dancing? What does the music sound like? I had them at breakfast. What do they eat? Do they really drink coffee? What and do they drink water, or do they drink other stuff because the water was not purified? So and then a simple thing like time. How long did it take them to go from London to Newcastle? Because I put the town near Newcastle because at least I could figure out the time frame. So you're doing all this kind of research. I wanted one person to get a tip. Well, are they going to leave a shilling or a pound? What is it? So you need to figure it out, and that's the part I love.
Do you get, like go down the rabbit hole and get lost in that?
Oh, all the time, all the time.
So you're saying all that stuff, and I'm like, I wonder what that is. I wonder that would take an entire day for me. Like I would go like off on so many tangents.
So what I tend to do is I keep a second document open, and I put whatever. If I'm 99% of my research is done online, especially now during COVID. So I will keep a document open online. I will put the link in wherever I'm researching, put the link in, and after the book is finished, after I finished writing the book, and after I've worked with my editor in case she has questions, so I know where to find stuff. I go back and I reorganize so that I can use the information again.
Oh, that's good. That's very wise. That's a good strategy. Lena's asking, how did you sell your first book to Carina Press?
So Lena will remember, because Lena is a member of New Jersey Romance Writers. We used to do conferences at the New Jersey annual conference, and the editors and agents would come. And I remember the editor came. I'm going to forget her name. Her last name is James. Oh my gosh. I know this woman. I speak to her all the time. Anyway, she asked me for my book. We were talking rather, and she didn't really ask me for my book. And then I found thank you, Angela James. Thank you, Anna. And she was doing online pitches for another romance chapter. So I had given her the premise, 2-line premise. She asked for more. I gave her the full blurb. She asked me to come back with the manuscript, and that happened during one of our conferences. Because I remember going to the conference and saying to one of I think it was Miriam Allenson, and I said to her, I don't know who this Angela James is. And she said, oh my God, don't you know So I said, okay. So that's how I got to Carina Press. So Carina Press took two of my books. They took my Knight of Runes. And then I started another series, which is the Stelton Legacy, which is a story about the seventh son of the seventh son and his brothers. So it's a curse and it's against some magic. So those two books went to Carina Press. And then they decided they were changing their dynamic. That's what I want to believe, that they were changing their dynamic, and it had nothing to do with sales, but I'm not sure. And they were no longer interested in investing in that series. And that was what I wanted to write. Not that it had to be those series, but that was the time frame that I really wanted to write. It was the 1700s that I felt comfortable with. It's hard to describe. It's hard to say that I really felt like that was my place. So that's when I started writing on my own. I went into indie publishing some of the books. And then I started writing. I got invited to Catherine Levique is the owner of Dragon Blade Publishing. And she asked if I would write with her her pirate series. So it's a collection. So she had different authors write different books in this collection. So I wrote 5 books for her in the pirate series, and then I presented the proposal for the Regency.
Wow. 10 years, 11, almost 11 years. How it all played out. Very nice.
Thank you. And it's been great. It's been great.
Can I ask, you mentioned that you worked with 3 other authors for the other series. Would you mind naming the other authors?
Sure. There's Emma Kay, there's Nicole S. Patrick, and there's Lita Harris. I'm more than happy to. We each write different things. I'm historical. Emma writes time travel, more time travel. Nicole writes military, and Lita is women's fiction.
Oh, wow. That's a good blend for one.
It's a big variety. And I can't tell you that there's not a bad story among them.
And 6 of them were written. 6.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned what you're working on now, the Lady and the Duke.
Yes, I'm working on the Lady and the Duke.
Okay. Do you just work on one project at a time, or do you work on more than one project?
I find that I work one project at a time. I'm tempted to write. I'm tempted to do 2, but I find I get too bifurcated. Because I get so involved, especially with the historic part and the research. Sometimes it bleeds over, and I would just rather keep to one at a time.
Another question, D.V. Stone, is there a genre you are tempted to delve into that you haven't tried yet?
So I'm taking a class. I also do that. I take classes with the Regency fiction writers. They were part of RWA, Romance Writers of America. They were once the Beaumont group. There's a class on Gothic novels. And I'm thinking that Gothic may be the next thing I try.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. That's good. Yeah. So you've kind of described your publishing journey. I asked this question of almost all the authors about the covers, because I would say the Lady and
can you see the other one? Let me see if I get out of the way.
Beautiful. They're both beautiful. How much did you have in the cover input? for the cover.
I'm gonna make you laugh because first of all, that wasn't the title I gave it, and that certainly wasn't the covers that I described.
Oh,
So, however, after sitting, actually, Catherine Levique sent me a message, and we spoke, and she gave me the reasons why she wanted the title changed. And I, be very honest with you, I'm not really married to my titles because they're more placeholders in my mind than anything else. Because I know that Night of Runes was supposed to be To Hearth and Home, so Night of Runes came out much better. And that was another book cover that I had never planned. But I had asked for a more flowing gowns, romantic looking cover. And when I first saw them, because I went, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. But when I really thought about my story, all three stories, it really fits. It really, really fits the story. Because it is about the woman. And it's not just because she's a light, bright thing. She's got substance to her. So the covers really fit. And I almost prefer not seeing the faces because it could be anyone. It could be anyone. It could be you.
it is. They're gorgeous. I have to say that, you know, we have a copy of The Lady and Her Quill, and it is just a really
Thank you.
cover. I will ask, I think I kind of know the answer. How important for you was joining a writer's group or having critique partners?
So when I first wrote that first story on my own, I finished the story and I had no idea what to do with it. I didn't know the process. I didn't know anything. All I know is I had 100,000 words and okay, what next? So I did some research and I found Romance Writers of America, their head office in Texas. So I called. They got all excited and they directed me to New Jersey, which is how I found the Jersey group. It was September. I finished the book in August. It was September when I called. They had their conference every October. So I went to the conference and they said, so what do you write? I didn't even know the answer. Well, I wrote a book. Well, what kind of book? A romance book. No. What kind of romance? And they had to go through, tell me what they meant by genre. Because to me, it was just a book. So, but I had a lot to learn. So I spent that first year learning everything I could. And it was through Romance Writers of America. It was through the New Jersey chapter. It was through the women in the chapter who were successful authors. It was through the women in the chapter who hadn't sold a book yet. It was through women who could help me with my grammar, because if my English teacher in high school knew that I was an author, and a USA Today author at that, he would be spinning in his grave, because there's no way that Ruth is an author. But all the people that were around me were just awesome. So but in that 1 year, from the time I went for my first conference in October to the second conference, that weekend was when Carina Press asked me for my manuscript. So it took me 1 year to clean it up, got it down to 90,000 words because there was a lot of stuff that had to come out. And that's when I sold it to Carina Press. So if you ask me, I told you I have no short stories. If you ask me, is there value in a group? Yes. There is value in like-minded people. No one will understand that how you hear words in your head, how you have people speaking to you as you walk down the stairs, or someone tapping you on the shoulder and saying, I would never say that. Take that out. I wouldn't say that.
Critique partners.
Critique partners are invaluable. They are invaluable. First of all, if you trust them, and I trust mine implicitly, they will tell you the truth. It's not just, oh, that's nice. They'll say, what were you thinking? That doesn't work. Or I'm stuck. They'll ask me the questions that will get me unstuck. Or when I feel I just can't do it, where I feel, oh my God, I have fooled everybody. You think I'm an author. Ha ha ha. And they will get me out of that imposter syndrome piece real quick. So yes, I find that the support and teamwork is absolutely necessary. And that lack of support and teamwork during COVID has been a detriment, at least to me.
That's another thing that COVID has affected.
Well, because you
Conferences, as
can't
you
see, it's not, I mean, we can talk to each other. We can tell, we can, we can go on Zoom together, but there's something about sitting in the same room, looking over your shoulder and pointing to something. There's that camaraderie and closeness and sisterhood that really makes it for me.
And do your critique partners, do they all write romance, or do they write historical romance, or are they different
So,
subgenres?
so Lita is women's fiction, which has a romantic element, but is not not necessarily a happily ever after or happily for now. The definition of a romance is a happily ever after or a happy for now. Jen writes a romance. She writes historical, and her time travel. Her historical goes back to about the 1920s, but she also writes Regency. I don't think she writes medieval, so she's writing Regency and forward. And Nicole, she writes about soldiers. She was very involved with support of Marines. I'm pretty sure she was the one who did the cookies. Years ago, she would send cookies because she's a really great baker to men overseas. She'd get lists and she'd send them. So she has stayed with that military theme. But it's always a romance.
It's always a romance. Okay.
Always, yeah.
And what advice would you give a new writer that's just starting out?
So the very first thing that happened when I wrote my first book, it was I went to a national conference, and the same Angela James had said to me, because the national conference is in July, and here it was, I handed my book in January, and she said, "Where's your next book?" And I went, "Oh my gosh, do you really want a next book? There are so many red lines on that first one. Are you sure?" So she laughed and said, "I want the next book." And that's the story. You can try to market, you can try to sell, you can try to do whatever you want. What will sell your first book is your next book. So write the next book. I actually said to myself, speaking to this acquiring editor for a large company, what does she know? Who knows me? Who is going to want to buy my book unless I market it? And she was right. It's write the next book. And the other issue is social media. One of the things you need to do is put yourself out there. And if you're a new writer and you haven't got a book out yet, you have a lot to say. So say it. You can talk about what you're writing. You can talk about what you're researching. You can talk about what happened at the grocery store. You can tell little stories. There's always a way in which to communicate, and communication is key.
Okay, that's great advice. At this point, I'm going to ask our participants if they have any questions for Ruth. If you would write it in the chat box, and I will ask her. But while we're doing that, I'm going to ask her my fun question, which is on your website, you mentioned you filled your passport while visiting clients at a previous job. Can you tell us any of your travel stories?
Well, okay, so I told you that I worked for JP Morgan, and my market was actually Europe and then I spilled over into Asia. And I traveled, my trips were a mandatory 2 weeks because you optimized on your flight. And this one year in particular, I had 14 trips scheduled, and my manager did as well. And his father took gravely ill. So I took over all his trips because it was only the two of us in the department. And I covered Europe, he covered Asia. That's how I got my Asia trips in. So that was why, and at that time, you had to get your passport, you had to get visas for a lot of the countries that I went to. Now you don't need it as much, but that's how I filled up my passport. Some of the stories, the very, very first trip I went on was the first stop was, it was five countries, 5 European countries. And I'm a mother. At the time I had 3 children. Our youngest was, I think Ari was about 3 or 4 years old. I had never traveled alone. And this was my first time overseas. So I had never been overseas. I had never traveled alone. I only speak English.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely a fear-provoking time. So friends of mine who traveled a lot said, don't worry, it's going to be easy. When you get a bill, don't worry. When you go to the restaurant, they include the tip in the bill, so don't worry about that. He gave me all these little hints. So in Frankfurt, I'm sitting there as the first stop, and my suitcase did not come off the conveyor belt. The airline said, just go to the hotel, we'll bring it over later. It's on the next flight. So I'm sitting in the restaurant and I see my suitcase. I see the bellman bring my suitcase up to my room. I was okay. So I look at my check and I can't see a line that says gratuity. I can't see anything on there that says tip. So I asked the waiter and I said, is the tip included? So he said, well, if Madame would like to leave a tip. And I went, well, that wasn't the question I asked, but sure. So I put 10% onto the tip. So I should have realized that was not right when he, in his very good German, I don't speak German, was arguing with the maitre d' on how to get his 10% off that bill. But that was his problem, not mine. I go up to my room and I see my luggage, my nice new gray suitcase, soft side, and it's black. Copy toner had exploded in the luggage bin, and now everything was black. Well, this was a canvas bag. I had all new clothes because I didn't travel before, so I bought all new clothes. So I carefully opened up my bag and took out my nightgown because I figured I don't need a nightgown. If I have to throw it out, I'll throw it out. And I start taking out my clothes, and there's a knock on the door. I go to the door, and it's the waiter with a bottle of wine. And now I'm saying, 1, I should never have opened the door. 2, I'm in a nightgown. 3, where's my husband when I need him? So the 4th thing I did was cry. He left very quickly.
That's a good story.
Story.
We do have a couple of questions. How long did the submission process take? I assume for your first
my first book. I heard pretty quickly back from Carina Press. At the time, Carina Press was just starting up and they were looking for books. Their mantra was, I hope I get this right, every book should have a voice. So, or something along that line of, sorry if it's not exact, but they were very eager for different genres. They had gotten a lot of contemporary, and 10, 11 years ago, there was this downturn in historicals. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for historicals at the time. But I remember handing in, it was like from October to January. the time I actually submitted the story till I got the contract, it was, I think I signed that contract either the end of January, beginning of February, and the book came out that following November.
So it was pretty fast.
Yeah.
Anna's asking, if you were starting over today, would you do anything different? If yes, what?
I would write that next book. I wouldn't have waited so long. I would have been more confident in my writing, and because most of the reviews I got back, aside from that really yucky one, were very good. The only thing that really stopped me was I was working full time, and I still had a young family, or maybe not so young. Our son was in college at the time, and my girls were married, but I still had responsibilities, and I was very active in community service areas. As I mentioned, I met this other woman through my work with the shelter, and I still continue to do community service through a national organization. So my time I have to share my time basically. But if I had to do over again, I think I would just be more focused on my writing.
Okay. And you've produced a lot in those 11 years. Oh, wow. Any of the stories, those travel stories that you have, any of them make it into any of the books that you've written?
So if you go on, if you would have, not so much, a true story that I can tell you about is, if you join my newsletter, you get a free book. Well, the second free book, one of the stories that you'll find in those opening newsletters, and I think it's the second one in the series, is a story about me being stopped on the highway on the Garden State Parkway here in New Jersey. And well, you know that, New Jersey, sorry. And it was a policeman who stopped me for going too fast. And he said, do you know how fast you're going? And I went, yeah, I'm so sorry. And he said, why? And I said to myself real quick, are you going to tell him the truth? Or are you going to try to lie and make it look really stupid? Because you can't lie very good. So I said, in all honesty, I'm an author. And I'm having problems with this story. Now, there's no one else in the car with me. And this hero is not helping me. He won't tell me what's next. Long story short, because you can read it in that newsletter. When he handed me back my license and registration, he gave me a warning. He turned to the empty seat next to me and said, next time, tell her what she wants. So, and actually, I kept, you get, in Jersey, you get a slip of paper with the warning. I put it back into the glove compartment with the registration. I put my license in my wallet. About 6-8 months later, my husband comes up from the garage and he said, what's this? A warning? And I told him the story. He said, only you, dear, only you.
That is historical, yes. As TV Stone says. That's a great story. And that was a good officer too.
Because he said, would my wife know? Would my wife know you? And I went, I could only hope. So
it's true. Are there any other questions for Ruth this evening? It's been really fun. Really fun.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. This has been, I will tell you that I was nervous, but this was a lot of fun. Noreen is asking me, how do you keep up with, what's WC?
Yeah.
Oh, word count. So my word count because I'm not working, I'm retired. My schedule is I get up in the morning, I watch the morning news, have my coffee, have my breakfast, and then I come up to my office here, and I have a spreadsheet that is it's automated. All I have to do is put in my total count of words on the bottom of my page, and it tells me how much I did from the difference between yesterday and today. And I find, I didn't think that was important to me for a long time, but I find when I see the word count on my screen, I go, oh, I need to write 200 more words, and I get more diligent. So I find that that goal is helpful for me. And I write in the morning. I'm finding that, and it's really strange because my writing time kind of mimics my work time when I was working at the bank. I would come in the morning, and because I handled overseas, a lot of my activity, my creative work was done in the morning. Then there'd be a little bit of a lag. And then before I went home, it was all that rush work to get things finished and put together my to-do list for the next day. So I find now I work well in the morning. At lunchtime, I need a break. I am probably brain dead. And then right before dinner, not right before, but about 3:30, 4 o'clock, I get that burst of energy to do more writing. Because my husband and my husband is also retired, and he has his community service stuff is more evening driven. I now have the luxury of writing into the night sometimes. And even then, I try to end it by 8 o'clock so that I can have some downtime and read. I find that is the one thing that I don't have enough time to do. And it's the one thing I miss. And I can see, Noreen, you're asking if I'm a plotter or a pantser. I am a plotzer. I plan an outline. My outlines for a 60,000 word book will be close to 10,000 words, sometimes more. And then I start to write, and the story sometimes develops. Actually, the story always develops. It doesn't go, it will never go as I planned it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Janette. I can't tell you how much fun it's been to talk to you and to talk to my friends.
It's been great. Very much enjoyed this session. I can't thank you enough for participating, and I thank everyone for participating tonight and for all your questions. Good luck on the book next week, The Lady and the Spy, and the future ones, the next three after after these three. Good luck and good evening to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.